Hello and welcome to today's edition of The Run-Up. My name is Nyamgul Agaji.
And I am Uchechukwu Onodu. The G20 summit is just ended in Bali, Indonesia, and it might be the first platform to push for softening Western rhetorics against Russia's invasion of Ukraine on its sidelines. We'll bring you an exclusive interview with Surinder Oberoi. He is a freelance journalist, an international relations analyst, and a former AFP. In that interview, he sheds more light on the G20 conversation.
There's also the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed, that said that the federal government will do away with petroleum subsidy by June 2023. What does this entail for the average Nigerian? We will be having Dr. PlusTvAfrica, an economist and analyst, have this conversation with us.
And now we take a break so that we bring you the interview with Surinder Oberoi. Stay with us. The run-up continues in a bit. Don't go anywhere.
As you know, we're talking about the G20, and we hear that India and China as countries have largely insulated Russia from Western sanctions. Why is India interested in the stability of Russia, and what is the extent of relations between India and Russia to warrant this?
See, first of all, as we all know that India, first of all, India and like Nigeria, they are countries like NAM. So they literally look for their own interest and individual decisions. But having said that, India and Russia always have been on a very good wicket. The relationship, you look into most of the wars which have taken place between India and Pakistan, where Americans had put up sanctions against India at that time, but Russians were always there as first country to support and help India in different issues. That might be a war of 1965, 71, or even at the time of Kargil. Secondly, Russia has always stood against any sanctions. For example, when India went nuclear, as far as their weapons are concerned, Russia was the one who gave more or less like a room to India and veto the issues. So this is the time when Russia meets India. So I personally feel that India will not let them down, even though India at the present scenario does have a very good relation with the United States, also because of Indo-Pacific, which is a separate topic and not to be discussed, where Russians are not feeling comfortable with India on that issue, or the way India is now buying the new weapons sort of a thing. But India is grown up, I would say, right now. I shouldn't say they have crossed their limits, but they have been taking decisions from country to country and individual issues. And here, as far as relations with Russia is concerned, I think India will stand with Russia in all respect. And that gives a big room and support to Russia also.
Okay, well, the countries that are supporting Ukraine, for instance, the Western countries and Europe that are supporting Ukraine are also directly involved in the in provision of arms and other kind of financial aid. Is India in any way directly involved in financing Russia in prosecution of this war?
See, India is only doing the business with them, trade. We can, the only blame which can be put up on India is about buying energy. And time and again, both Prime Minister of India as well as the Foreign Minister them said that in fact, what they are buying is less than what is still being supplied to the European countries from the Russian country, despite several sanctions which are there. Yes, and they have made it very clear, even in this G20 meeting, they have made it clear that they will continue to buy the energy which is required. In fact, Prime Minister went into a statement where he said that the chain supply needs to be protected. It needs to be given a fair treatment. And that is where the things will continue as far as India is concerned. But India very strongly has also opposed the war. Prime Minister again in G20 in his speech mentioned about the ceasefire, which he had asked for, and asked for a diplomacy that it needs to be there. And I think India would not mind if the world is ready to accept India as a negotiator in it. Or maybe it's happening, which I don't know, because many a times confidential talks do take place. But there have been frequent visits of Indian top officials as well as the ministers to Moscow. Like recently, India's foreign minister was there. So I personally feel that India will not support financially in that way, but as far as the business is concerned, trade is concerned, there they may cross the limits or buy more cheap oil, which they are getting right now.
I know you've already said something about the fact that maybe there are negotiations going on that you don't know, because there could be high-level confidential negotiations. But we understand that the new chair of the G20, which is the Indonesian president, is trying to open talks between the US and Russia. Do you see India playing a role in it, a role that the world can see, that is not confidential, like you said?
Yeah. See, first of all, I personally see, it's my personal view that G20 is not a platform where issues of security will be discussed in a bigger way. But as far as the side talks are concerned, this gives an opportunity for most of the top leaders to have one-on-one talks and negotiations. And the statement which came from the Indian point of view, which stressed on ceasefire, and I quote, ceasefire and diplomacy, automatically speaks about that India is playing some sort of a role in that. And they have been, an Indian Prime Minister time and again have directly dealt with the Ukraine top officials, the chief of the Ukraine country, as well as with the Russian president, as well as the foreign minister, which is there. So there could be India playing a role in doing this thing. But India has very strongly, directly told Putin also that this is not an era of war. So there are strong statements which are coming directly from Prime Minister to the President of the Russia, where they are stressing that war is not the solution. You have to come for the negotiation. And similarly, I think that now West also needs to prepare Ukraine. And I think to some extent, Ukraine is ready to negotiate. Of course, they are putting up some sort of conditions, which we read in different media reports which are coming up. But I think it must be when there have been some withdrawals or taken back some of these areas, giving some sort of a room. I mean, today also, like yesterday only, India again went for abstained themselves from the sanctions which United Nations General Assembly was making against Russia on the cost of war that they have to pay for it. So I personally see that all these things are the steps towards negotiations now. Now, these are they are asking for the maximum, and the issues of minimum negotiations are going to take place, because sanctions have not played a major role for me, I would say. Why I'm saying this thing, that war should have ended by now. But Russia's economy, if you read into their economic reports, which are coming, of course, from the Russian media only, it's around 4% decrease which has happened, not a major thing. And rest they have been able to substitute. For example, some of these American chains, which were very popular, like McDonald's, Starbucks, and other things, which got closed 6-7 months earlier. But I have been told that they are running with re-Christian name, the Russian names, and the stuff is same. So same things are happening. And having said that, we should also not ignore the gray market which is there. So Russia continues to work on the gray market business which is happening. And I don't know how many countries must be getting the oils through that black marketing or a gray market which is happening there. So sanctions have not played a role. What I mean to say is that they have not been able to put up a pressure. So that's why things are now shifting towards negotiation. And when the statements from the leaders are coming up, especially in G20 meeting also, about ceasefire, about diplomacy, I think it's going towards that way. And I personally feel India is being trusted by many of the countries at the present juncture.
Yeah, but by way of emphasis, I'd just like you to clarify what you meant when you said that the G20 is not the right avenue, it's not the right platform for that, because the G20 came together because of economic purposes, and you're concerned about what goes on in other countries, and that for me is directly linked to security as well. The economy and security, they usually go together. So if you say it's not the right platform, what is the platform, and what can the G20 do on the platform that is the right one to make sure there is this peace between Russia and Ukraine?
See, what I mean to say is that this is a good platform, but final decisions will not be taken as far as the security issues are concerned. This gives a room, an opportunity, a place, a neutral place to discuss. For example, India has not been talking to China for a long time, since 2020, March, April, when there were clashes on the border. But this gave an opportunity to the Indian Prime Minister at least to shake hands. And same is true with Putin, who has been able to now break the ice, even though both stand by their own issues, that might be Taiwan or China's road and belt and other policies which are there. I personally see that here, this is more or less like a conclusion of the Bali meeting which is happening, where handover of the G20 will happen to India. Of course, this is a good platform, a multilateral platform, but finally things will have to move under the United Nations General Assembly or the security which is there, or directly between the two. Here only those initial things can be there. Some wrinkles can be removed, that can be ironed out. And some negotiations can be taken place, which will be more or less like a confidential talks and other things. This might bring in some good seeds of negotiations, I would say, in this type of meetings. But finally, they will have to take the decisions on some other account and not in this particular meeting.
Now, when you were talking about the fact that sanctions have not really worked, some people feel the reason is because the powerhouse, the economic powerhouse, has shifted from Europe now to Asia, and that's why these sanctions are not working. So are you of the same school of thought?
Yes, you see, this is one of the facts also, that both powerhouses, India and China, continues to do their regular business with Russia. You look into their export and import, and even they are now trying to work in their own local currencies between the two countries. So that has helped indirectly. I mean, there was a blame game on India that India is reselling the oil, cheap oil, which they are bringing it from them, which India denied, of course. But of course, when they are getting those cheap things which are there, but again, you need to look into as I said, that sanctions should be in such a way which should give some sort of results. And that is not happening. And that is where they need to rethink about that when you put up a sanction, how to withdraw in that particular atmosphere. And is it effective enough? I mean, it can happen to some of the countries which are not economically well established. But here, it's one of those pillars, I would say, which is being supported by, again, China, now the equation which is called as G2 between the US as well as the China sort of a thing. So naturally, they will not be much affected. So as you rightly said, that yes, these two pillars are keeping Russia more or less in a vibrant state.
India and Nigeria, they have a relationship. They've maintained a relationship, a good one, a strong one, in economy, medical tourism, security, and even education, because there are so many Nigerian students in India as we speak right now. So what else can be done to further improve these relations between Nigeria and India, especially in the light of the fact that some Asian countries are making inroads into Africa, and Nigeria in particular? Take, for instance, China. So what is the plan of India towards strengthening this relationship with Nigeria?
See, I personally see that the relationship between the two countries is slowly but surely developing, and trust level is increasing, I would say. But having said that, what is more important is more interaction, which I think is lacking. It's not happening, and it has to be at the multiple level. For example, connectivity between India and Nigeria is very low. You need to have direct flights and maybe more than one flights. Both have got huge populations, both have got huge interest. Huge amount of export and imports are also increasing when you compare from 2020, 2021, 2022. The arrow goes up as far as the commodity export or imports are concerned. I personally see air connectivity is very important. You need to have more than 2 or 3 flights every day to start with. And there should be direct flights between Nigeria and New Delhi or, any of these capitals or financial capital, Bombay, Bangalore, and other areas. People to people contact is also not that big. I understand that medical health as well as education has started working around, but I still see very few students of Nigeria. Only around 2,000 students, I think, got admission this year for Indian universities, while Indian universities are now doing very well. So programs in education, especially links between universities, different universities are very important. Different MOUs are to be looked into. And also same way, the studies between the two countries, the two democracies needs to be increased. There needs to be special courses which needs to start between the African countries, having Nigeria as the top democratic country in it, as well as between India. The South-South cooperation has been quite good between the two countries. How we can further enhance it. And I think role of think tanks is again important here. You need to build up that intellectual connections where more discussions should happen. More intellectuals of Nigeria need to attend the meetings here. You see, India is already now trying to raise their, I would say, trying to be on the high table. When I say high table, they're trying to literally reach on the different multiple tiers or platforms which are there. For example, they are heading right now the health issue cares of the WHO. They are going to be the G20 heads. Already India has started 2 multilateral platforms, one in solar energy as well as in the infrastructures at a time of disasters. So there again, some links needs to be made. And of course, the new issues which are there, that is cyber warfare, terrorism, counterterrorism. A lot can be done between the two countries. There's so much of cultural resemblance. The historical facts between the two countries. What we need is more platform for the students, where some amount of money is sanctioned to be built up, and things can really jump up. You need I call it as a leapfrog jump which is required between the two countries rather than going slow at the present moment, because relationship, if you look into the last 60 years, has really been developing between the two countries. And I'm yet to see some anti-Nigerian statements coming from India or anti-India statements coming from Nigerians. It's not there. And this needs to build up. I personally feel people to people come as well as think tanks can play a major role.
Well, I'll just like to finally ask you this. They say, show me your friends and I'll tell you who you are. That means whatever circle of friends you find yourself, you need to learn from them and gradually you become almost like them. You did mention something about population, India and Nigeria. In fact, Nigeria is the most populous black country in the world. India also has its own population, which is a lot more than Nigeria. But you seem to have things working for you in some ways. What are those marked lessons you think Nigeria could learn from India and not be afraid of the population? Because you have a population of like times 5 or more of ours, but we're still fidgeting, afraid that the population might be too much, but it's working for you. What are the lessons that we need to learn from India to utilize or capitalize on the kind of population, which also translates to manpower, by the way, to succeed?
Correct. See, education is very important. We need to stress a lot on education. You see, you have got a lot of youth population and they're looking for some opportunities. You also have to look into that what are the services the globe requires that might be in the cyber or in the IT industry, which needs to be developed. One of the major part which India's growth is taking place, of course, internally things are happening, is that education where India is really moving fast. And then they are providing services to the global platforms. That has developed in the last 30 or 40 years, which is now giving dividends. That is one of the reasons that foreign remittance from the Indian diaspora is returning in a big way. I think India is #1 country receiving those type of amount of money. If education is there and some opportunities, the way relationships are to be built between country to country, I think that gives a lot of chance for the rest of the country to develop. Then automatically the manufacturing sector can really go up. Right now, you cannot do competitions with countries who are already producing so much of manufacturing, industries like China, Vietnam, even India cannot compete in those type of things. But they have started providing services to all those industrial as well as to the intellectual software development issues. So that I personally feel is one of the major issues which Nigeria needs to work on, and that is IT, information technology, solar energy, as well as on cyber threats which are coming up, because artificial intelligence and other things have literally come under now, more or less in the IT knowledge which is there. So that's this is how things are changing. And this is where Nigerian youth or educational system needs to adopt that. And that's one place where India and Nigeria can build up relations, more MOUs between different universities. Now, we have started in India for the last few years, specific universities. For example, on forensic universities are coming up, where only forensic is being taught. Similarly, the cyber issues are being taught in different IITs which are there. Artificial intelligence is really moving up. Solar energy university is coming up. So those type of new issues which we see that which are the future calling are the subjects. We don't have to now beat the same old subjects which are there, which we had been following, which I call it as colonial syllabus of our education. You finally have to now change slowly and adapt your own issues which are there. If you stress more education, rest of the doors will automatically open.
Oberoi, thank you so much for your time. We know that you had so many things planned for today, but you've given us this time. We are really grateful. Thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be there and looking forward to interact more with you in future.
Thank
Great
you.
And nice meeting you also.
Well, very interesting. When I asked him the question about what Nigeria could learn from India, because we have the greatest population in Black Africa, and they have about the greatest population
in the world,
you know. And he said a very key thing is education. And now ASU is declaring some days to go lecture free again because they are being paid half salary. And if education is going down and things like this are still happening, I just wonder why. But, well, before you respond, Bayo has been there all along. We didn't even say hello. We didn't say welcome, but he is there. And he always has our back. Bayo, welcome to the program. Sorry that we didn't say this earlier.
Good morning, Yangu. Good morning, Uche.
Good morning.
No problems at all, I understand. I'm very happy we got Surinder. and it was nice listening to him. He's very knowledgeable on a lot of things, you know, and he has a passion for expanding the frontiers of relationship between Asia and Africa, as you can see there from what he said.
Yeah, but like he ended when he was being asked what Nigeria could learn, and he harped on education, and not just education generally, but special type of education, a different kind of education, not necessarily what we have been learning before now. Talking about zeroing in on technology, AI technology, and so many other things that we didn't have in the past and all that. And in Nigeria, I was just talking with Uche right now, that the lecturers are declaring days to go back and do
So lecture-free days.
lecture-free days because they are being paid half salary. And I'm just wondering, when can we get it right in the educational system in Nigeria?
You see, Uche Anyango, yes, he's correct. India is 1.3 billion. I lived in India for 4 years. I was posted there in my former life for 4 years.
How many
I
lives do
saw
you
a
have?
lot of things. I was in many cities in India, so many places, and I can attest to what he's saying. He's absolutely correct. But for me, this goes beyond ASU. You know, if you pardon me, and I say this with all sense of responsibility, to a significant extent, ASU is a solution, but also to some extent, ASU is a problem, right? Those who set up educational institutions in Nigeria, to some extent, they are providing a solution. To another extent, it is a problem. Why do I say this? We are emphasizing the same approach to education we've always had. There is no private, highly regarded private polytechnic in Nigeria. We are even killing polytechnics. The strength of Asia is in polytechnics. And then you have universities that are specialized. Some years ago, I was telling a friend of mine, when Kogi State was going to establish a university, I said Kogi State has the largest iron ore deposits in Africa. That's at Itakwe, okay, and Ajaokuta. I said Kogi State should establish a university of materials and metallurgical engineering. It immediately becomes a center of excellence. It focuses on harnessing Ajaokuta steel industry. It focuses on exploiting the iron ore reserves in Itakwe and Ajaokuta. Okay, but who is listening? You know, then you set up a university to do history, to do English, to do philosophy. I mean, I'm not against that, but if we really want to move, we need to be thinking, with due respect, like what Surinder was saying. Our missionaries, whether it's the Christian missionaries or the Muslim missionaries, they are also establishing the same type of universities. Who is establishing a University of Medical Sciences? Maybe only on those states today. And we have a University of Education only in Ogun State. Look how long it took us to establish a University of Education. We need to be going into the specialized areas. IT is the easiest, and we have seen what Nigerians can do. Unfortunately, some of it is negative. Okay, you have these minority Nigerians who are doing negative things with their IT skills. Why don't we harness these boys, white and girls, and set up universities for IT? And we begin to write software. In no time, I can tell you, Nigeria can even overtake India. And India is willing to even exchange with Nigeria on these things. Okay, India has gone so far. I'm stretching it. We might not overtake India, but we can be the dominant contributor from Africa to the global IT space. So I'm passionate when I talk about these things because I lived in Asia for 5 years and I saw a lot of things. And honestly, I don't think there's anything Asia is doing today that Nigeria cannot do. We are just not approaching things the right way. And this is not just government, because everybody in Nigeria likes to point fingers at the government. The government has its own share of the blame. But the private sector, what are they doing? I just gave you the example of missionaries. You name all the universities owned by Christians and Muslims in Nigeria. How many of them are specialized universities? How many of them are even ranked on the webometric ranking? I've been tracking the webometric ranking for the past 8-9 years. The best universities in Nigeria are still federal universities, despite all the challenges. Where is Babcock University, which is the first missionary university established in Nigeria? Where is Igbinedion University, which is the first private university established in Nigeria? 3 years ago, Covenant University significantly achieved something great. They broke into that rank to become the first missionary university in Nigeria to rub shoulders with the federal universities on the global webometric ranking. This is not a ranking done by Nigerians. It's global webometric ranking. But where are the others? They charge so much money as school fees. They have the same structure as the federal system we are criticizing. The visitor is the head of the missionary institution. They are not thinking of funding these universities from outside of the missionary structure. So in a matter of time, we will still come back to the same issues ASU is talking about, because we are not changing the structure.
We're not
Sorry
changing.
that I got passionate.
It's actually,
We are all
it's
very
beautiful.
passionate about. We are passionate about
We're
this.
all for it, right? But then
Yeah.
I wanted to ask this question: who is to blame, or maybe who is to blame is not the word. Like, where is this confusion or worry coming from? Why I say that is, we were having a conversation, one of our guests the other day, and the conversation degenerated, of course, to education again. And he was mentioning how that the university has everything it takes to actually change the course of the education sector in Nigeria. According to him, the universities have everything. They have thinkers, they have psychologists, they have engineers, they have lawyers, and these people have all it takes. They can come together and actually build the system that they want. And one of the questions we asked him that day is, do they have what it takes to take these decisions independently by themselves? Because I'm also talking, stemming up from what you said about the private sector. We have young persons. I started learning web designing, by the way. My classes started yesterday, and that is in tech. And these are the things that we're talking about. There are lots of, the person teaching me was self-taught. He has sought for opportunities, for support, for funding, and none of them is coming. And this is a young person. He is barely in his 30s. And I'm sure there are a million and more other people like him out there. He has what it takes. I mean, I'm not the only person he's teaching. He's teaching a lot of other people. And these are people that can actually do these things if the universities are allowed. And that brings me to my question. Do they need a special legislation to be able to take these decisions and make the changes that are required? Or is it also a cap at hand going to the federal government to beg, okay, this is what we want to do, can we be allowed? That's my question.
Okay, thanks a lot, Uche, for that. I don't entirely agree with him, that the universities have all it takes. And we are not going to, I do not have enough time to elaborate. But let me just give you quick examples. If you are looking for an artisan, and Professor Patu Tomi has actually spoken extensively on this particular issue. If you are looking for an artisan to do to fix something in your house, you see the quality of artisanship we have today has terribly degenerated. Okay? And it's simply because we killed the technical colleges and we killed the polytechnics. The chief executive officer of Google is a graduate of the IIT in New Delhi. Surinder mentioned IIT, that it means Indian Institute of Technology. The Indian Institute of Technologies are like Yabatek, Auchi Polytechnic, Polytechnic Ibadan, Calabar Polytechnic of those days. They are like that, but they are well structured. They are integrated with the private sector. They are the driving force in Asia. It's the polytechnics. It is not the universities. The universities bring cutting edge. And that's what he was talking about when he talked about specialized universities. You have the regular universities who will produce administrative people for you, managers, policy makers, decision makers, and they will feed the civil service bureaucracy. And then you have the cutting edge universities specializing in critical areas. So I feel that the universities as they currently exist they have the latitude to introduce new courses. The federal government is not stopping them. They just have to get their accreditation from the appropriate agencies, right? Secondly, we need to go and revive and strengthen polytechnics. Thirdly, we need to go back and rebuild our primary schools. The missionaries took back some secondary schools. They did not take back their primary schools. The primary school is where you build the foundation. Nobody is interested in the primary school. Everybody is interested in setting up universities. And we are not getting it right. That's why I say that all of us in Nigeria, we have our own share of the blame. For me, this is not just about the government. We all have our own share of the blame. We are all not playing our role appropriately. If we begin to play our role appropriately, we'll begin to see changes happen positively.
Conversation about education is almost never going to be exhausted. We need to like map out an entire week to talk about
aspects of education.
Yes.
By the way, if I just add quickly, that's why it's difficult to sanction India. With this, because we started off talking about the G20.
Yeah.
And for us, the concern about the G20 and what President Widodo is trying to facilitate, this meeting between Russia and the US, the sidelines of the meeting currently that's held in Bali, is simply because this war in Ukraine has disrupted global food supplies. And Europe especially is badly hit. But we have 11 countries in Africa that are also terribly hit. Now, India is playing a mediatory role to try to also facilitate peace. But some European countries may not be happy with India, but they cannot sanction India because India is helping them solve all their IT problems. So imagine that the strength that has translated into what you call soft power in diplomacy for India, it has built its IT industry. That IT industry is giving India money, contributing to its GDP, but has also enhanced India's soft power. And Nigeria can easily dominate IT, easily.
Okay.
And that can also enhance our economy and our soft power. But it's not only going to be the government.
Wait. And Igbo man will say, jailbreak, right?
Jiriwayo.
Whatever it is. I know, like Uche said, for us to end anything education, it would be difficult, especially the Nigerian system that we're seeing. I think, like Uche suggested or said, it's a good idea that we could dedicate a week and be taking aspects of education that we will be talking about. I felt insulted. I felt ashamed when the man was saying that they have only 2,000 or thereabout Nigerians in India studying. And I felt, how many Indians do we have in Nigeria that are also studying? And he felt 2,000 was not a great number. So we are running there, and they're expecting us to keep running there more than 2,000. Maybe we should be like 7,000, 10,000, and all that. And then we are not doing anything to make sure that we have that kind of educational tourism as well in this country. We will really need to talk more about this thing.
Yeah, we'll get an opportunity to continue the conversation on the G20. But for now, we want to bring the run-up conversation home. The Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed, has said that the federal government will do away with the petroleum subsidy by June 2023. She said this on Tuesday in Abuja during a press conference to mark the end of the 28th National Economic Summit. Reports also say that fuel subsidy gulped 2.56 trillion naira between January and August 2022. And also in the medium-term expenditure framework, the federal government proposed to, send 3.3 trillion naira on fuel subsidy between January and June 2023. And of course, according to the minister, removal of the fuel subsidy is part of the federal government's medium-term plan in the budget. It's going to be a very, interactive conversation. And to have that with us, we have Dr. Chinwike Ubah. He's an economist and an analyst, and he's also the convener, Amaka Chinwike Ubah Foundation. You're welcome, sir.
Uche, it's my pleasure to be on the program.
All right, so the subsidy is going to be removed by June 2023, this fuel subsidy. How do you think this will affect the Nigerian economy?
Well, I think it may not be appropriate to say it in absolutism or definitely. It may be removed because we definitely will have a new government in by that time, and we do not know the line they will take. But in answering your question, removing fuel subsidy is neither here nor there. This is because as at today, we do not have a complete information on what the quantity of fuel we are consuming as a nation and all that. So it's still numbers that we need to look into deeper to understand it. So, and I think that's what the new government might need to do first, to understand what quantity of petroleum products do we import, do we consume, and all that. And that will help us determine that. But beyond that, I've always canvassed for the removal of fuel subsidy. First, as a result of the corruption that is also involved in the whole process, and the opaque nature of the whole transaction that is also related to fuel subsidy. It will affect the economy. There will be panic, and that will also lead to sudden rise in prices of goods and services. Already we are battling with inflation. As you know, yesterday the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics released the current inflation rate, which is now about 21.09%. If you recall in my last program, I did say that we'll continue experiencing high inflation until after the elections next year. And that is what will happen. So by the time you remove fuel subsidy, as a result of the panic, you will know bus drivers will raise their prices, people will raise their prices, and that will also affect the general economy of the country and well-being. But over time, it depends on how the government wants to do that. If the money that is going to be saved from the removal of the fuel subsidy will be deployed first in providing palliatives to the people in terms of providing that public transportation and all the rest of it all, and also deploying it in the social sectors. I know I listened to your conversation earlier on education. In our country, part of the problem we're experiencing is not just about tertiary education, but you find out that the basic education is at its lowest ebb. You know, we have a lot of out of children, out of school children, and the kind of education we are getting now is not qualitative also. So until we deal with those issues, so if government decides to deploy savings from those things in those kinds of sectors to improve our education, improve our healthcare, improve our wash and rest of it all, I'm sure it will also help to cushion the would-be negative impact of fuel subsidy removal by next year, if that holds actually.
Okay, you've just talked about the consequences to Nigerians if this should be done, but speak to the timing of this removal. It's always somehow, using the Nigerian parlance, an administration is leaving and there's massive employment. Just like now, I saw a few minutes ago that the embargo on employment nationwide has been removed. So they want to do mass employment in the federal sector. Okay, good. And then subsidy is going to be removed theoretically, by June, which is just May. A new administration is coming in, and by June you're removing subsidy. So how do you see the timing? Speak to it. What is it, good or is it bad? And if so, why?
You know, when I made my introductory remarks or answering to the first question, I spoke to that. I said, we are not sure if fuel subsidy, petroleum subsidy will be removed in June because we'll be having a new government. This government cannot speak to a new government that will be empowered then. And as you may have observed, the announcement is more of a political announcement than an economic announcement. The reason being, The current administration has been in power for almost 8 years. And before they came in, it was part of the things they said they would do. They said there's nothing like fuel subsidy and all the rest of it all. But we've had that, the fuel subsidy gradually increasing. As at for 2023, the budget for 6 months is about 3.6 trillion. As at August this year, we have spent over 500 billion on fuel subsidy. So, and you didn't do it while you were in office, and you are leaving, making an announcement that will be removed. And I don't think that is in terms of timing, that is not realistic, And I don't think that is what is going to happen. I think that announcement is just made to also be in the good boost that the government is doing something. But in actual implementation, I don't see that happening immediately.
Okay, Bayo, I'm very sure you're listening to the conversation. Maybe you have a question or two or an observation.
No, I absolutely quite understand and share the sentiments that Dr. Obai is expressing. I feel too that we need our political elite to begin to consider taking hard decisions. Okay, but those hard decisions have to be has to be accompanied by transparency. Has to have structures to guarantee accountability, and then whatever benefits immediately accrue from them should be channeled to the benefit of the population. That has to bear some of the side effects of those. We've been rigmaroling and going around in circles over this issue of subsidy removal. Even at some point we were told it was removed, and suddenly again we are still paying that. And I think that if we do not have a local capacity to refine our especially petroleum products, it's going to be extremely difficult for any government not to have to at some point subsidize fuel consumption if what we buy on the global market is affected by a dramatic rise in prices, as we saw recently. We are being terribly affected simply because our own local refining capacity is almost zero. If we have the capacity to do these things ourselves, it will cushion. We might have an increase, but it will not be as hard and as harsh, as it will be when we have to again be importing fuel, and I'm not just talking of petrol alone, but other commodities and things that we need. We must build our capacity to refine them, to finish them up, and not just be exporting raw materials all the time.
Let's just round off here, if you may, in 30 seconds, if you can. I like this. This is the season, so we'll talk about it. 2023, we'll have election. What is your projection? What is your hope for 2023 election and all that? So, do you have faith in it? What are you expecting? Just briefly, please.
Well, personally, I'm very optimistic that the election will be free and fair, as has been promised by the electoral body, the INEC, and the president. And the citizens will elect a leader with the capacity, with the character, and the competence, no longer with the bad mouths and promises that does not deal with the how, solving problems as a nation. And we believe that if we have a president that is truly elected by the people, then we'll begin to deal with our long-term structural problems as it should be, taking us to where we need to be.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Oba, for coming on the show today. We do hope to interact with you more in the coming days.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be taking a break. The news will come up at 12, and when we return, the run-up will continue. Do not go anywhere. Stay with us.